people who have Cushing's disease to people who've got type 2 diabetes, right? Because they all suffer from high levels of blood clotting factors, right? And that's von Willebrand, like I spoke about before, LPA, which is comes about through LDL, the dark lord, low density lipoprotein cholesterol. There's a relationship there. They all have high levels of VLDL, very low density lipoprotein, which is another cholesterol, right, another clotting factor. Plasminogen activator inhibitor 1, LPA and fibrinogen, they all run these clotting factors, right? You're always going to have these clotting factors going on, right, and bringing about a destruction of the system, right? Now, like I say, with people with Cushing's disease, right, this is due through a tumour on the pituitary. Now, what's interesting is people who have an atheroma plaque, an heart attack, run very, very similar systems in the fact that they don't know they're stressed out. They have a hypothalamus pituitary axis dysfunction. There's a dysfunction, right, brought about by stress. It's a stress relationship, right? They don't know they're in dysfunction, right? So what you have is, and that's why I say to you, if you've just got over a heart problem, you've just had an heart attack, and you're type 2 diabetic, you've got to look into that, because there's a deep lying cause there. There's a definite relationship with stress there, a most definite relationship with stress. The good news is, right, you can turn this system off by exercise. It resets the system. That's why I'm so big into exercise. Exercise will reset the stress system. The HPA axis, right, dysfunction can be reset by exercise. It's very, very good for that system. Another way to turn it off is obviously to meditate. Now, guys, I was just like you years ago before I had the heart problem, and I thought, oh, all that Eastern stuff, like, not for me, you know. But believe me, it's one way of getting control. The most powerful thing you'll ever have is the thing you never use, and there's never a truer word, and that's your mind. Your mind is the most powerful thing you will ever have, and it's the thing that you'll probably hardly ever use in your life. If you gain control of that through meditation, you'll do seriously well at turning, right, and retuning the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis off. Now, how this works, guys, is quite simply, you have an hypothalamus gland that tells the pituitary, and the pituitary, these are working while they're in the mind, these are working, right, with your thoughts, right? Now, it's a system that's inbuilt, and it's intrinsic with a sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. I know it sounds very, very, well, it is a very complex system, right? But I just stick around, guys, and follow this. This is really interesting stuff, and it's groundbreaking stuff and never talked about, right? If you're in that statin cholesterol mind, honestly, guys, this is a really, really interesting system I'm trying to talk about here and explain. It is a complex system. So it's a fight or flight symptom. It begins in the brain with the hypothalamus, the master gland and the pituitary talking to one another, and whether they send a signal to the adrenals that sit on top of the kidneys. Once they send the signal, this becomes a chemical product, right? Like cortisol will be released, right? And if cortisol gets released through the production, like I said, of adrenocorticotropic hormone, which is a precursor for cortisol. See, it's a precursor. It's an ingredient that you need, the body needs to make the cortisol. Once the cortisol levels rise, then a destructive mechanism starts to begin within the body. Like I say, some of the muscle tissue will be broken down. You go into a fight or flight stress system. The muscles can get broken down and converted into amino acids by the liver. Then they'll get changed into glucose. This will be dumped into the bloodstream. There's also a fat system going on. The normal subcutaneous fat is normally stored as triglycerides under the skin. You've heard it called subcutaneous, right? It's stored as triglycerides, right? The triglycerides are released and broken down into glycerine. Glycerine is the backbone of a fat. It's easy storage system. A triglyceride is just 3, right? The backbone is glycerine. It goes again, it makes its way to the liver where it's converted into glucose, and you got it, it's dumped into the bloodstream, right? Now the pancreas cannot handle this amount of sugars being dumped into the system, because you probably don't know it, but you're in fight or flight dysfunction. So therefore the pancreas pushes out even more insulin, and eventually you've got so much sugar travelling around your bloodstream, right, for energy. If you was in that fight or flight syndrome, right, it causes a breakdown of a disruption with the nervous system. It works on some of the nerves and damages them, works on cells and damages them, right? It also causes a dysfunction in the pancreas, right? Well, if you think about it, you've got type 2 diabetes there, haven't you? That's exactly what happens with type 2 diabetes. Where you go to the doctor, right, and the doctor says, oh right, here's metformin, take this for the rest of their life, and that's, you know, they treat it as something individual. For me, it could be very well linked, because there are lots and lots of people on a typical Western diet, the high sugar, high flour, you know, the typical Western diet, right? There's a lot of people on that who go through life and don't all get type 2 diabetes, see? So some people do. Now for me, the people who do are the ones who've got an HPA dysfunction, an hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis dysfunction, right? It's not turned off, it's still operating, and they don't quite know. They're obviously unaware of it, right? So you're getting an enormous amount of fat converted into sugar via the liver, and you're getting all the body's sugar stores dumped into the bloodstream, right? And so then you get visceral fat, intra-abdominal fat building up around the internal organs, around the heart, around the liver, around the pancreas, and it gives you that distinctive look. Right, going back to the Cushing's disease again, they get the very same thing, and it's nicknamed camel hump. They get that lack of fat on the extremities, the legs and the arms, and a build-up of fat around the abdominal system and around the waist. Yeah. Now, a lot of people with type 2 diabetes get this, and obviously are not privy to this information, so don't quite ever always put the story together for themselves, right? I personally think there's a definite relationship. Now, there are 1 or 2 researchers who do agree, and they think there's a definite relationship, and they've termed it the metabolic syndrome or syndrome X. For me, yeah, it's definitely a metabolic syndrome, but I think it's high cortisol levels, because it's a hypothalamus pituitary adrenal dysfunction, and that's what brings it about, definitely.